Thank you for joining us today for another session of the GESI webinar series. My name is Tamara Lutfi. I'm the coordinator for the Global Evidence Synthesis Initiative GESI Secretariat. Just to remind you that the GESI webinar series serves as a platform for the GESI network members to share experience and expertise in evidence synthesis and to learn about potential collaborations. If you're using GoToWebinar for the first time, you are automatically muted as an attendee. You can send us your questions by using the tab on the right, or wait until we open floor for discussion, and you can use a raise your hand button so that we can unmute your microphone. Today's session is on visualizing systematic maps with EviAtlas. Our presenter is Andrew Feierman. So Andrew is an environmental data scientist who specializes in using programming tools to help academics visualize and communicate their findings. Very happy to have you on board with us today, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Tamara.
Okay, so Andrew, GoToWebinar is freezing for 2 seconds at my end. Please give me 1 second to fix this.
Sure, that's no problem. And I'll just say to everyone briefly, good to chat with you all today. It's a relatively small group today, so even though we're doing a webinar, of course, and we're spread out over the world, I just want to encourage you all, either whether it's during the presentation, I know you can send questions in, or afterwards, try and think of this like there's just a couple of us in a room, and you can ask questions and have a little bit more agency to speak up if there's something that's not clear. Let's see. That said, I think now you can all see my screen. Is that right, Tamara?
Yes, perfect.
All right. So we'll get going, and I'll tell you a little bit about EviAtlas. And why we developed it, and maybe why it's relevant for GESI. So as Tamara said, my name is Andrew, and I am a data scientist and programmer. And I often find myself working with researchers, very similar to yourselves, helping to develop tools to make your science more understandable and more easily communicatable. So to that end, today we're going to talk about EviAtlas, which is a tool that myself and a few others created for visualizing evidence synthesis databases, or really for visualizing systematic maps. So before we go too far further, we did want to ask you all a question today, which was, who here has created a systematic map before? And is this something that you regularly encounter in your work? So Tamara has just activated a poll, which should be on your GoToWebinar widget. So go ahead and we'll take a couple seconds to give everyone an opportunity to vote.
Okay, so we have a 50-50.
All right, so we've got a 50-50 split there. It looks like half of you are familiar with systematic maps and have used them, half of you aren't. So I'll give the short version of what I understand systematic maps to be. Systematic maps are essentially a very prescriptive and process-driven way to explore all of the academic literature that has been done on a certain topic, and it's sort of an evolution of meta-analyses to take all of the data and look at everything that's been compiled on a particular topic, and then look at sort of it all at one time. Tamara, is that a proper explanation, would you say?
Yes, that sounds great.
I was working with a researcher a few months ago, or about a year ago, and he was telling me that in his work, which was largely focused on ecological issues, very often he develops systematic maps. He does sort of global searches of a particular topic that he wants to look at, but he has trouble taking these systematic maps that has a geospatial component and actually visualizing them and understanding, okay, where are his studies clustered? Is there some bias as far as where things are studied or what types are studied where? And he was looking for basically an open source free software that allowed him to generate visualizations that would both give him more insight into his research and also share his findings more. So we created an app called EviAtlas, which we will all go through in a second, and there's actually a link to it in the bottom right-hand side of the screen. And the idea is that all of you as researchers can take your data and hopefully within 5 or 10 minutes generate a web-ready interactive map that you can place on your personal website, you can place on a blog or a tweet, and just basically make it easier for you to share your findings quickly in a way that I think meets people where they are today, which is on the internet. The last thing I'll say on this is if anyone wants to find out more about sort of why we developed the paper or why we developed this app and what our motivations were behind it, we did publish a paper about why we created EviAtlas and what happens with it in the journal Environmental Evidence, which, if I understand correctly, is associated with GESI in some ways, or at least has less of overlap in those who access them. A little more on EviAtlas and what it hopefully does is if you upload a data set that's formatted correctly into this online tool, it allows you to generate an interactive map that you can use on the web, and it also allows you to create some data visualizations that we thought were very common, and hopefully saves people some time as far as they don't have to necessarily fight with Excel or Google Sheets or a programming language to develop some sort of visualization that maybe they use all the time. So on the screen now, we have a map on the left as well as a heat map that sort of compares two variables in a systematic map and highlights basically where the frequent combinations of those two variables are. And you can sort of help see maybe some blind spots in a systematic map if you compare things in this way.
So Andrew,
yes.
Just if I may, for those who are seeing this map for the first time, if we can go back to that one.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect. So the numbers in the cells represent the number of studies, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so every intersection, let's say the first cell on the top left, so there are 4 studies talking about organic and grasses. So the vegetation being grasses and the farming system being organic. And so with this systematic map, it's similar to, if you've scoped the literature or you've looked into what the different topics that your search has cover, but you're just representing them in a way where you can easily see where there's a lot of research versus where there's a gap of research. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm glad you gave that explanation. So moving on, I will touch on this now, and we can talk about it at the end. But again, it's a web-based tool, EviAtlas, and it's designed for anyone to be able to upload their own data to develop a systematic map. So here I wanted to show you all an example of the data underlying the sample data set that our app uses. and just so you can see how things are organized. What really our requirements are is that your data that you use when you upload it to the app needs to be in a format that a machine can easily understand, which basically means that information is sort of split out so that each cell in a spreadsheet has one piece of information, whether that's a title or a year that the study was done or some other related piece of information. And then also, to use this tool, data needs to have a geospatial component, so that involves latitude or longitude information, or also our app accepts shapefiles if anyone works with those. So I know that if you haven't really seen how it works yet, maybe this will seem esoteric, and we can go back to data formatting requirements later if anyone has questions on that. The app, as we developed it, is fully open source and free. This is something that we have developed and built up over the past year, and really hope to make more useful for researchers like you all in the future. And it was built with the R programming language and is open source, and we encourage contributions from any researchers who wish to take the tool and improve it for their own uses, and then contribute those efforts back to the community. So actually at this time, we wanted to do a second poll to ask you guys, do any of you work with the R programming language in your work day to day? And if there is interest in that, we can talk more about sort of the open source nature of it, but if there's not, I think we'll gloss over that. So there's another poll coming up, and I encourage you to answer it now.
Okay, so we have the majority have not used R, so 60%, with the 40% who have used R.
Okay, so then I think since it's not relevant for the majority of people, I will say if contributing to a project like this is something that you are interested in, no matter what your skills are, I guarantee there's a place where you can help, and my contact information will be at the end, or you can visit our page on GitHub, which is now linked on the screen. But please reach out, because we love getting people involved, and there's no better way to learn than by working on a project. So for those of you who answered yes, feel free to reach out. But I think the best way to learn about an app like this is to give it a shot, is to use it. So there's a URL on screen right now. I encourage you all to go visit the site yourself. Be warned that it may run a little slow if we're all visiting at once. So I'll give you all a moment to just type this URL in on your screen, and then I will bring up the app myself, and I will take you through some of the main features of what EviAtlas does.
Andrew, maybe
Yeah.
we can paste the link to everyone in the chat box on the right.
Sure. Yes. I will send that out on the chat box. Okay, so I just sent the link out, estech.shinyapps.io/EviAtlas. It's in the chat box on GoToWebinar. So just a couple more seconds, and then I'll start sort of walking through this app and how it's intended to be used. Okay, so hopefully most of you should be at this website, or a website that looks exactly the same as what's on my screen right now. This is EviAtlas. So EviAtlas, first of all, at this landing page, we have a little bit of text that's about why we created the tool. We have some more information about systematic maps, if that's something that's new for you, and a little bit of information on how to use EviAtlas in case you get past this webinar and forget everything that I say, which I tend to forget things very quickly. So the first thing I'll say is, since I know most of you, I'm sure, don't have data prepared, there is a tab on the right-hand side of the screen that allows you to utilize a sample data set, which was, it's the same data that was on my screen earlier. And it's just something that we put into the app to allow people to basically see what functionality and capabilities EviAtlas has before they format their own data to use it. So go to the right-hand side of the screen and click on the button that says Sample Data. So with data loaded into the app, you get information on the bottom of the screen that basically tells you, if your data has been uploaded correctly. So you'll get information about column names as well as the shape of your data, which can help you maybe debug as you try and figure out how to use the tool. But the main feature of EviAtlas is to create an interactive web map. So if you click on the left-hand side of the screen, the part that says Evidence Atlas, you will be presented with a map on the bottom of your screen and a bunch of options up on top. So at this point, I just wanted to, I'll take a moment and I'll say if anyone has issues or if the website's not working, speak up in the chat and I will slow down. But if I don't see anything, I'm going to assume that everyone is able to follow along. So this map should be displaying the studies that you have included in your systematic map, spread out all over the world based on latitude and longitude. Depending on what maybe your data set has multiple columns for latitude and longitude, or maybe we're not able to automatically detect what the latitude and longitude columns are. There is an option on the left side of the screen to select these manually in case you upload a data set and what you think should be the latitude column is not automatically detected. It doesn't always work correctly. But once you get your information displayed on the screen, you have a nice slippy web map that you can slide around and sort of look in more detail about where all of your studies take place. We have some features that allow you to, one, change the base map that you're looking at, which is basically the underlying map behind things to make things a little more clear, or put things in a native language, basically of the location that the map's taking place in. We also allow you to basically change the color of points on your map by a certain key variable. I think the best way to explain this is if I color points on the map by nation, you can see pretty clearly that each country has their own color. So this is coloring points by nation really just shows you that what's happening when you change the coloring of points. But if you do something in this data set like color points by farming system, you can see that there's a few variables, and this allows you basically to see where certain types of research take place to give you more of a geospatial sense of what's happening with your data. As you scroll around, you'll see that information pops up when you click or mouse over different points of research, and you can add to these pop-ups by clicking on top, and there's a drop down that says select pop-up info. So here I'm going to add information about nation as well as farming system, which is again how we have colored our points as well. And now we can really start to understand what the map is showing us. So now we can understand that the red points mean that both types of farming systems that are being looked at are present for the red points. Yellow points means that we don't have information about the farming system. It's not described. Whereas gray points mean that there is a conventional farming system being used. And so now, thanks to these map pop-ups and the way that we've colored the points on our map, we can get a little bit of a sense of, okay, we see, basically, we don't have data in this case for farming system, but we also see mostly conventional farming where we do have information on that. If you use this map to basically create a view that you think is interesting, maybe you want to zoom in on a particular country somewhere, or when you color things a certain way, you can see that things make sense to you for whatever study you're working on. Then you can save your map. There's a tab up top where you click on Save Map, and that allows you to, if you click on Save Map, a file will be downloaded onto your machine, an HTML file that is essentially that you can drop anywhere onto any website or blog. And it allows you to basically take this interactive map that we've created in this app and move it anywhere else. So if I open this file, you'll see that now we have a map zoomed in to the same place that I had zoomed into in the app. But it's still interactive and it's still clickable, and I could email this file to you and you could load it up on your own machine, even if you didn't go into the EviAtlas app again. So this allows you to create something that's shareable and easily passed around amongst your colleagues or to anyone else. So I'll take a moment, take a look at the chat to see if people are experiencing issues or if everything's going okay. I don't see anything, so I hope that means that things are going well. And then with that, I will look at sort of two other features of this app now that we've looked at the evidence atlas that you can create with EviAtlas. There's also the possibility to maybe you only want to look at a subset of your data. So in this case, I will again use nation as my foil. If you click on the tab on the left that says map database, then you'll get a screen that allows you to select some filtering criteria to subset your data set. And so now if I only want to look at, say, studies that happened in, we'll say, France and the UK, I can select those. And then select the tab that says Use Filtered Data. And as we go back to our Evidence Atlas, I'm actually not able to filter my data, and I don't know why that's happening. Apologies, that's a little bug. But actually, if those of you using the tab online, there should be a way to apply your filters, a button to do that. And maybe some of you are having an easier time online. Not quite sure what's going on with my version. The last thing that I wanted to show you all is you can, as Tamara explained earlier, you can use your data set that you upload to look at things like a heat map that shows you maybe where certain data or where certain combinations of variables are being researched or where there might be holes in what you're studying. So if you click on the tab that says heat map on the left side of your screen in the app, you can basically select any variable in your data set. In this case, I think last time we looked at farming system and vegetation. So now on the screen, you should see for me, there's a chart, a heat map that's basically exactly the same as what was in my PowerPoint earlier, but this allows you again to quickly browse through your data set and say, okay, what's being studied a lot, what is present in a lot of studies, or where might there be holes. So I can easily click through and change farming system to another variable, a new heat map appears, and we can again get more information on what's being studied. Now we can see it's very clear that most studies have happened more recently in this case with the sample data, whereas there's not a lot of older studies. So that's all for the demo.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, if anyone ends up using this for their own purposes and has any issues with the app, again, I encourage you all to reach out to me, contact me via email or GitHub. We're always happy to help, and we're always trying to help these tools help as many people as possible and get used.
Yep. Perfect. That's so nice. Thank you. So actually, we have Ms. Amina, who I think. So can you go back to the dashboard where we can see all the options on the left?
Sure.
Okay, and moving from EviAtlas to the next map. So her question was, can you repeat how you reached the other map? I think she was referring to the example you gave before jumping to map database.
When I downloaded a map, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me real quick start this up again. So to download a map, I'll create a new one just to show that we're working with something fresh. And this time we'll get a view of, I guess, San Francisco in the US. There is a tab on top that says Save Map. And if you click on that tab, that gives you options to save your map in 3 different file types. 2 of them just display basically pictures, PNG and PDF files, right, are static images. But if you save your map interactively, this saves a version of your map as an HTML file. So I'm going to click on that again, and it's going to download from my browser. So this will look different to all of you depending on what browser you're using, or if you're using a Mac or Windows. But for me, I guess I'll highlight this by saying if I look at my files, here's, everyone can look at whatever's on my computer for a moment. Now I have a few files on my screen. Can I make that larger? No. That are called EviAtlas map, and they have the date on them. And if you look at the files themselves, they are HTML documents. So if you click on these on your machine, they should open up in a browser, whether that's Firefox, Chrome, or Safari. So now if I double click on one of these HTML files, you'll see a new file opens up, but it actually just looks very similar to the map that we were just looking at. So I'm now clicking between tabs, and you can see that the map that we saved in the app is now its own separate file, and that's what can be sort of passed around or placed on a website or something like that. So let's see, I can't quite access the questions. Tamara, do you think that gets to the heart of it? Is there anything else I should explain?
I think this was good. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So we have another question.
Yeah.
Let me actually, this is a long question. Let me just copy it to make it easier. So the question is, how do heat maps appear in the downloaded file? Would one have to download the heat maps to be included in the downloaded file before sharing it, or the person receiving the downloaded file will have the option to produce them as they wish to see the data?
Yes, so heat maps, and this goes for the plots that you produce in the tab that's called descriptive plots as well. Those are separate from the maps that you save. So when you save one of these interactive maps, you have an option to save the map from sort of 3 buttons at the top of the screen. When I click over to the heat map, and again, I'll whip something up. Let's look at farming system by greenhouse gas. information. So when I have this image up, there's essentially two ways to save it. One, you can save this image like you would any other picture on the internet. If I right-click, I can just save an image or copy it or anything like that. But also there is a button that says download in the bottom left-hand corner below the image, below the heat map image. And when I click that, you see now on my screen, I'm getting another sort of standard question to download a file from the internet. So in this case, it's a PNG file, which is a static image. And if I save that to my machine, it's going to look, I'm now back in my downloads folder. It's just going to be an image sort of like anything else that you might download off the internet. But that will be separate, I should clarify, from the interactive map. So you see on my screen now, I've saved two interactive maps, and those are HTML files. And then I have a heat map that I saved, which is a separate image. It's a PNG file. Let's see, anything else?
Okay, so do we have any last questions? So actually, Andrew, I'd like to ask you something.
Yes.
You mentioned using, so developing this through you coding on R, right?
Yes.
Would it be easy to develop something that would be similar, but instead of a map, geographical map, would actually use some other sort of a setting? So, you know, something more of, I can't think of anything specific at this point, but, you know, something that would not be related to geography.
That would not be related to geography. That would be related to, so do you mean something like treatment type or something like that?
That's an example, or, you know, different public health settings. You know, just let's say we have a certain public health intervention, or let's talk about parenting styles with their children. So how parents deal with their children. And then we know there's 7, for example, types of parenting in general. So we want to pull our database on these 7. And then that would be our base, right? Not the geography, but these 7 interventions, and then look for how they've been addressed. So instead of having them as one variable in our table of interventions and outcomes, actually have them as our main you know, element of interest.
Yeah, I mean, that gets to an interesting question, which was this, of course, this tool was designed with geospatial and ecological data in mind, but evidence synthesis, I know, covers many fields, in particular is very popular in the medical field. So to that end, this is the sort of thing, you know, right now we have heat maps and we have sort of simple histograms that the app can create to help you sort of visualize some features of your data quickly. But we are always looking for more suggestions. So to answer your question, how easy is it? It's always possible, and you know, now that we've built something, it's easy to iterate on it and sort of add little features here and there. But from my perspective, as not a researcher, it's I do rely on researchers to give me ideas and suggestions and speak up for what they need. So again, I encourage anyone to reach out if there's a particular feature that would make this usable or helpful for them.
Amazing. So the reason is that, you know, if actually the question behind my other question would be, can we upload the data and visualize it using the heat map? But even if this data wouldn't fit on, you know, the geographical map, so it would not be a geospatial kind of data. But would the heat map still work for some different topics?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe that would be a good starting point then.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we have another question from our attendees. Can they be merged so one can see the interactive map and the heat map?
At the same time?
Yeah, I think that's what the question is referring to. So at the same time, see both.
Yeah, I mean, so for that, it's, I guess, the thing that I think about is we've designed these components to be essentially something that you can take and place in a blog post or on a website or in a paper yourself. So we did try to keep the components as separate as possible. If they were to be combined, that's the sort of thing that if you were to put them into a report together, you would have to do sort of on your end, which is to take those two files and place them side by side somewhere. Unfortunately, the app, it keeps them very separate, I think, for a reason, so that they can be flexible and made available to as many researchers in as many situations as possible.
Okay, so would anyone like to ask any other question for Andrew, make a suggestion before we close for today? Okay, so it doesn't seem like it. So Andrew, thank you for the very informative session. Everyone, if you'd like to contact Andrew, you can send him an email on andrew.feierman, Feierman @sei.org. We will be sharing the slides with everyone who's here today, if you'd like to refer to them at a later stage. And the recording of this webinar will be made available on the GASI website in the coming 15 days. Andrew, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Tamara.
Definitely a pleasure for us. Okay, so thank you, everyone.
Bye, all. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.